It's 6:30 on Tuesday night, so it's time again for What We're Reading. Tonight, I have fellow branch librarian Courtney Moises. Hi, Courtney.
Hi.
I used to work with Courtney at the Cascade branch, so this is very exciting. But now Courtney works at Kentwood and Games. So if you've dropped into those two branches recently, you might have seen her there. Courtney is youth focused, but she tells me that she's not going to talk about children's books today. You're actually reading grown-up books now, Courtney?
I am.
Yay! What are you reading?
All right. Well, okay, that's a lie. I mean, the book that I'm currently reading is a teen book. So I am still holding true to my reputation from when I was at Cascade, and I read 0 adult books. But I'm reading The Six of Crows, which is by Leigh Bardugo, which is in the Grisha verse. And so the Grisha trilogy, there's that new Netflix TV show called Shadow and Bone. And so that series is based on a YA fantasy series called Shadow and Bone. It's a trilogy. It's really interesting the way the magic works. In the Grisha verse, there are people called the Grisha, and they have these, and they don't consider it magic. They call it small science, where they're able to manipulate matter. So some people can manipulate like metals. Some people can manipulate the elements. Some people can manipulate like cells in your body, which is honestly, they're the most terrifying to me. They're called heart renders and healers, and they're terrifying to me. But then there's this one person called the Darkling, and he can manipulate like light, something like that. But The Six of Crows is a series that takes place in that realm, and it's a fantasy heist. So Kaz Brecker and his crew of amazing criminals who honestly stole the show for me. They're in the show too. And it's a plot line that we don't see in the book, I think. But they have to break into this like impenetrable fortress in like enemy territory and get something for this person. And they'll get like $30 million or whatever their currency is. Their currency isn't dollars, it's something else. So it's really interesting. So that's what I'm reading.
You know me, Miss Courtney. I do not read teen books hardly at all.
No.
I used to, if a teen wanted a recommendation at Cascade, I had to run and find Courtney and make her stop eating her lunch and come out and talk to me. But I have shelved a lot of those Bardugo books from that trilogy, so it's really super popular. What is it about the crows?
So The Six of Crows is just, I think this is just what they're called. So
okay, don't all the books have like big crows on the cover?
Just changed the cover. No, that's a different series. It was Bone in it that just changed the covers. No, one of them has, so the first one is Shadow and Bone. The second one is Siege and Storm. And then I can't remember what the third one is. I read those like a year or two ago, probably 2 years, because I read them before we were in quarantine. But no, I think it's just this one has it. And then this one, the second one in this one is Crooked Kingdom. And then she just released a new duology that takes place in the same realm, but focuses on a different character that you also meet in Shadow and Bone. But you haven't met him in the show yet.
I just checked. It's got a big stag with antlers on
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which the stag is important.
Okay.
I won't tell you why. You have to watch the show because I know you won't read the book. But watch the show. It's very good. It's really good. I think they did a really good job with the two plot lines, like, and how it moved things along a little bit better than the book did. But that's the teen book that I'm reading. I have read adult books, which is probably due to the fact that I don't see a lot of teens in the library recently because of COVID. And we aren't getting to go in and do book talks in the schools right now for obviously safety reasons. So I haven't felt the pressure to read teen books quite as much. I thought I'll give adult books a read. So I'll talk about the book that you haven't read first, because I know you've read the other book that I talked about. But this is The House in the Cerulean Sea. It's by T.J. Klune, and it is an adult book, even though I feel like you look at the cover and think that this could be like a J book until you turn it, and then it's pretty thick. But it's like a middle grade novel written for adults. So like middle grade novels have like this wholesomeness to them and like whimsy where, bad things happen, but a lot of the time things end well. And just like the characters in middle grade books always care a lot about each other. There's a lot of heart in them. And that's the same in the Cerulean Sea. So Linus Baker is our main character, and he is a caseworker for orphanages that have magical children. So magical children in this realm, or in this world, live in these orphanages and in these houses. And he goes in and he makes sure that everything is up to snuff and that the kids are being taken care of, that they have things. But he's very by the book. So he doesn't really he doesn't portray as being a very empathetic person. He's just there to make sure that they're following the rules and that the kids are fine. And so he's so good at his job and at emotionally distancing himself from the kids and this is literally what it's called, extremely upper management. Literally what it's called. They call him in and they're like, listen, bud, you're so good at your job. We're going to send you to this horrible orphanage on an island, and you need to make sure that they're doing their job. And so he freaks out a little bit, but he's like, well, I guess I'm going because I have to.
Okay, this is an adult book, Courtney?
No, an adult book. Because he is an adult, and there are adult things that happen. So he gets there, and he meets these kids, and they're like the weirdest but sweetest kids. One of them is literally the son of Satan. His name is Lucifer. I called him Lucy. And so he's like terrified. There's this girl who's a gnome. I forget what her name is. But he also meets Arthur, who is the keeper of the orphanage. Like these kids everyone is terrified of them, but they're just kids. So it's really sweet, and he gets to know the kids, and he gets to kind of open up to them. He's there for 2 months, and so you kind of get to see how he opens up. And I won't tell you how it ends because I have to read it. But this was like my favorite book of 2020.
Really?
Yeah, it was very much a needed book in 2020.
Okay.
2020 was not the best year, but this book was definitely the best. I actually was recommended it to me by my friend Megan, who works at Schuler's, who reads 1 million books at a time, I swear. And she posted about this on her Instagram, and it had been on my radar, so I picked it up, and I was not disappointed. I listened to the audiobook, which is on Hoopla.
Oh, yeah.
Is an audio file. It's really good. I think the person who narrates it has a British accent, which is always a plus when you're listening to audiobooks.
Yes.
But the other book I read, which I just finished this a week ago, I listened to it. I read part of it and I listened to the rest of it, is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. And it's would you classify it as like historical fantasy or just it's cataloged as fantasy, but it has like those historical elements.
It does, and I tell people that when I'm book talking the book. Say it reads almost like historical fiction, but she's actually alive through the whole
thing. Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts that like you don't really realize it until close to the end is like how art plays such a big part in it as well.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a spoiler maybe. But that was really interesting to see how some of those moments that she talks about. So for those of you that haven't read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab, it's a dual timeline. So it's is it 18th century France? I think it's 18th.
I believe so. 18th or 17th? I
think it's 1700s, so it's considered 18th century.
I was thinking it was 1600s.
Or maybe it is.
Maybe
1714, so very early 18th century. So she's like Addie, and it flips between 18th century France, later in France, and then 2014 present day New York City, or present day from when she wrote it probably. And Addie is this free-spirited girl. She doesn't want to get married. She doesn't want to be tied down. But she, of course, as to quote like I kept picturing Pride and Prejudice where Elizabeth's friend is like, I'm already a burden to my parents because she's like unmarried and old. Like, well, that's what I just kept picturing. So she's like 23 and she's being forced to marry this man, and she's like honestly the worst thing in her mind is like be married to this man. And so she makes a deal. Of course, in that moment, were you yelling at the book, like, please don't do this. Like, please don't do this. Nothing good will come of this.
Well, it's interesting
girl.
How she stresses over and over at the beginning, don't make a deal with anyone after midnight, or is it under the stars or in the dark or after midnight? I can't remember.
It's when the sun goes down, because is it Estelle? Estelle's her neighbor, who's like the kooky, spiritual woman, and she tells her, don't pray to the gods after dark.
After dark.
And she's like praying, and then as she's praying, the sun goes down. But she's also supposed to get married. Was she getting married in the dark because they didn't have electricity then? How is she getting married? That just hit me. I was like, if she's praying after dark in her wedding dress.
But she ran away.
And she did run away, that's true. But if it's already dark, what time was this wedding?
Well, she took a long time running away.
So she's like praying in the mud to a god to answer her and stop her from getting married. But
it was more than getting married. It was the entire, because then we're talking about the early 18th century, where if you got married, that meant almost constantly being pregnant.
Yeah,
means all of the work that you had to do was so physical and so arduous as a wife. Think of the laundry and and how they prepare meals and everything they did is constant. And the difference between the life of an unmarried girl and the life of a married woman, you can see how they would think,
very different.
My life is over and done. And there was, of course, no romance.
No, not at all. I think he was a widower, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. So
kids, he needed help, take care of these kids.
Yeah. Well, because she was old. She's 23. She's past her prime. So this is the only man that would take her.
Death, or die in childbirth, or and just her life would basically be, as far as having fun and gazing in the stars, and her trips with her dad to the big cities, all of the enchantment and excitement in her life would be done.
Mm-hmm. I still kept yelling at the book. That one was like, this is a bad idea. This isn't gonna end well. Because as Rumpelstiltskin says in the show Once Upon a Time, all magic comes with a price. That's right. She didn't really understand what the price of the deal, and this happens early on, so I feel like we can tell people what the deal is. So she basically tells him, because he's in the business of taking souls, but she doesn't want to give up her soul. She wants to live her life because, as Penny said, like that's what she wanted. She wanted to be able to live her life, do her thing, and not be tied down to some man and be bearing children for the rest of her life. And so she says that he can have her soul when she's done with it. And then the deal happens, and then she wakes up and she goes home, and her parents look at her basically like she's a ghost, and they don't know who she is. So she realizes soon that was the price of the deal. It's like she can live for as long as she wants, but no one knows who she is.
She's a stranger to them. She's a stranger to everyone.
Everyone. Literally, she goes, that was like the hardest, I think, and that's why it took me a long time to get into this book. I'm not going to lie, because the very beginning where Addie is kind of exploring her curse and she's kind of pushing against boundaries and seeing what she can do and what she can't do. And basically, as soon as she's out of eye shot, like as soon as they can't see her, literal seconds later, they stop thinking about her. They don't remember what they're doing. So if someone's chasing her and she gets out of their line of vision, eventually they will forget, what they were doing and be very confused. And so like there's a scene where she stays at the inn and she like tries to get a receipt from the woman. And this is again in 18th century France. So like you can't just pull up the receipt on your phone and be like, look, you charged my credit card this much money. This is my place. It's just kind of word of mouth. And the woman insists, she's like, nah, I don't forget anyone. And then Addie gets kicked out of her room, not like hours later.
Yeah. It was hard to realize all the repercussions this would have.
Yeah.
And like, well, that she couldn't have a job because she would have to apply every day for the same job.
Yeah.
What she wanted was not to belong to anybody. Just, I am ruler of my own domain and world. No one gets a piece of me. So nobody got a piece of her. No part of her.
Well, until she meets a man, a guy, a dude, whatever. That was the other thing, was like she goes into, in the beginning, before she meets someone. I don't know if I can spoil that or not. Like it's kind of a plot, but anyways, we won't talk about him. But in that beginning, when she talks about like relationships that she's had, and she does this throughout the book, it's so hard because she falls, in love with these people, and they have to fall for her like every day.
Yes.
She remembers all these things about, I think Toby is the first love that is talked about. And so, she's met him countless times, but he can't remember her. And so she has all these memories about him, and it just kind of breaks your heart that like he just can't, and not by any fault of his own, obviously, but he just can't remember her. He can't reciprocate those feelings.
So she ends up having hundreds of one-night stands with the same person.
The same people too. She's kind of asking for her own heart to get broken. She keeps going after these same people, but I guess it would be hard not to if you know that you enjoy this person's company, even though you have to be, Jessica this night, Jennifer that night, and Nicole the next night. You could use the same name because they don't remember, but it seems like
she can't even say her name though.
She can't even write it. She can't write anything. She cannot leave a mark. Like she can't even spill wine on white carpet and have it be there. That's a gift in of itself, but she can't leave a mark. I wonder if she was walking in the snow, if like her footprints would disappear.
I'm sure they would.
That would make it really hard to chase after her or to find her.
I found that part very fascinating about this, to explore like you said, explore the edges of her curse. Exactly what are the ramifications and what happened. That was fascinating to me. And you don't realize how much people's memories of you matters to your life. Because it doesn't seem like that would matter all that much.
Or your name even. Like I think we take for granted our name and just being recognized, like not having that recognition. I think that's something that you really take for granted because it's always there. I always wear my name tag. But like she can't say her name. She can't even say close to it, I don't think. I think she can maybe say an A, but like her name is Adeline, but she can't say Addie either, which I feel like she should be able to say Addie because that's technically not her name. That should be a loophole that she should be able to exploit. Okay, what were your thoughts about the darkness? What do you think he's closest to? Is he the devil? Is he the Grim Reaper? What do you think? I forget what she calls him. I think it's Luke or Luca.
Yes, like as if you were Lucifer.
Yeah.
Which is true, but I think he's just... Because what fascinated me is when she was young and would imagine a man that she would be attracted to, because she wasn't attracted to anyone in the village and anyone that she was supposed to marry. Her picture, the person she drew, was who this evil person ended up looking like. But I think it was more than that too. It was the look in his eyes. I think it was the spark in her. Part of it was very close to that spark that made her want to leave and made her not want to get married and be there. The darker side of that quality is what's in Luke.
Mm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, she didn't want to belong to anybody. I don't think anyone else matters to him.
Right. No. I don't think so either.
So but I mean, it's another side to that coin. So if there weren't some kind of correlation between them, I don't think the book would have been as interesting, because they kind of did a dance through the whole book.
Yeah, they do. It's pretty.
But I hate romance novels, so don't read this thinking that this is the boy came and that boy, because I like that she is smart and independent, and this is not.
It's definitely not. It has romance, and I wouldn't even say romance necessarily, but like finding someone who sees you, I think was very important to her. And just like the people in her village, you know, back in the day, no one really saw her for who she was, you know, like, and that was just how people saw women, you know, in that century, and for, you know, centuries after, women weren't their own people. So, but she was very, like you said, she's very much her own person. She was very much wanting to do her own things and live her life how she wanted to. And she had some really great memories that she goes through, but they always end, you know, some better than others. But
and I thought it was fascinating. She talked about how her curse would have been easier if she were a man.
Yeah.
Especially some of the time periods she had to go through, because being an unknown, unattached woman wandering through strange cities is horrifyingly dangerous in most of these centuries. Whereas you wouldn't bat an eye if she were just a young man.
Yeah, well, and she dresses up like a young man, you know, because she learns that, navigating the world as a young woman in that time period where you're supposed to be married. And she doesn't age as well. So she looks 23. So she is a young woman this whole time. And, you know, even in present day, being a young woman, she lives in New York City, for example, in the present day parts. And so even being a young woman alone, she can't live anywhere. She's found like loopholes to that sometimes. But I mean, that was I think that was hard to read. Because I was just like worried, even though she's obviously not a real person. I'm still just like, oh my gosh, where are you sleeping? How are you still alive? Like, how is nothing like super horrible? And obviously, horrible things have happened to her, but yeah, it was a lot to handle. Penny, what have you read recently?
Well, have you ever? I get stuck sometimes because there's books I really want to read. Our very good friend and librarian Nanette recommended this book to me. So one of her all-time favorite books. It's called A Little Life, and I cannot pronounce his last name. Can you try to pronounce that, Courtney?
Yanagihara? Maybe. Yes. Our apologies to that person.
Yeah, it's a finalist for the National Book Award, a Man Booker finalist. I mean, it's a very well-respected book. And I'm like, I'm going to love this book because I love what Nanette loves to read. And I'm a literary fiction reader usually. So prize winners usually are good for me. So I was very excited, and I can't get into it. You ever get those books where you just can't? I'm not running to it at the end of the day to read it. I'm not wanting to keep going. It's not capturing my attention. It's about 4 men in their early 20s, living in New York City. They're friends. They've known each other for a long time from college, and now they happen to all be living in the same city. And this always gets to me too. I find it slightly unrealistic to me. It's like, we're all living in New York City, the big life. And one of them, of course, is an artist, because so many people make a living through art.
Yes.
And And I mean, they all have these exciting, heavy hitting minds that are just the best mind of the, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
They're, to me, they're just not, don't feel like characters I can totally connect with. And one of them walks with a limp and is always in pain, but we don't know where his pain is coming from. And he's got a past. And evidently, I've read some reviews of it, so we're going to find out that he's got this very dark secret, and everybody around it and finding out all this stuff is coming. But I just can't connect with the people enough to figure it out yet. And I want to keep going, so I'm going to try.
I
But the
believe in you.
problem is when this happens, I get stuck. So instead of reading like, oh, this book, and sometimes I'll read one or two a week, and then I'll just get stuck and I'll play a word game on my phone instead of reading. I don't feel like reading them. See how sad it looks, dude?
It looks very sad. I mean, he is clearly in pain.
I don't know if it's also this, it's almost summer and I might be ready for something lighter. I did just get my hold on Paris Library,
Ooh.
which is new on the bestseller list and incorporates two of my favorite things in the title. So I
Paris
might have to
Library,
sneak away and
Maybe
read
you
that.
need like a
first.
palate cleanser. Or maybe you need to read that and then you can dive into the sadness that is that book.
A Little Life. It's also very long.
Oh. Yeah. I mean, books that I read are usually pretty long too.
Well, when
really
you get into it, that's intimidating.
Yes. Yeah.
Some of them just fly.
Yeah, like I started Cassandra Clare, so she's like a YA fantasy, and Beth loves her, and I love her too, but her series before this one was just it started so sad that I couldn't even finish it. And her books they just keep getting bigger. I'm like, it's like the size of a brick at this point. Who could build a house with these books? They're so thick. But yeah.
But Addie LaRue was fun, and it was a page turner. It didn't take me long to zip through that.
See, it did take me long, but again, I think it was the sadness that I was like, how is this going to get any better for her? How is she going to, this just seems sad. I mean, there were obviously a lot of really good quotes. Like V. Schwab is an amazing author, and I've been meaning to read her more high fantasy. She's got a couple of she's got a series and then a standalone, I think, that have been on my to-read list for years, like 6 years, I think. It's been on my list since I started at KDL.
Yes.
But I knew I wanted to read this one, so I did read this one. And I was not disappointed. I gave it a 5 on Goodreads, more like a 4.5, but you can't give half stars.
Well, thanks for coming and talking to me tonight about your books, Miss Courtney. It was so good to see you again. And I can't wait till you can do story times again.
Yes.
Thank you, see Miss Courtney. It was a very one. Next week, I've got some collection development librarians. They're the librarians at KDL who pick out the books for everybody. So that's going to be really exciting to hear about what they're reading right now. So I hope everyone will be back next week. Thanks for joining us tonight.